So yeah, I mean, the really big news, I would say, I mean, other than the macro market, there's nothing. I mean, really, tomorrow is the big day for the macro market. But the really big news is the Elon moving into Twitter and setting up like a war room with David Sachs and Jason Calcanis and the guy from Andreessen Horowitz, and they're just really like going to town, like, and they're really trying to make some changes quick, right? I mean, there was like that
Yeah.
notice, like what was it, like Twitter employees have 7 days to figure out like a verification check mark, or they're going to be fired. Or I saw some rumor about that. I don't
I
know how
think that
true
was a
that is.
rumor. I don't think
Yeah,
that was an actual
true
true
ultimatum.
thing, especially
Yeah,
given, like Elon's back and forth with Stephen King this morning of,
yeah,
he
I saw
it seems
that.
like he's trying to figure out a way to do that. I don't think he necessarily had
Yeah,
an ultimatum of it needs to be in place in 7 days. I
yeah,
think that upset a lot of people for sure.
yeah.
So
That did. That
I
did.
think they want to be careful about how they implement that and roll it out.
Yeah. I mean, it's really this is an exciting time, an exciting transition time for me to witness with Twitter here. I mean, it could fall either way. I mean, there's a lot of scrutiny. There's so much scrutiny Elon is under at the moment. Like every
Yeah.
other major news publication is publishing articles about, you know, Elon being the antichrist with too much control. I don't know, and like it's just Washington Post is putting some pretty crazy things out about taking quotes from all kinds of like government officials that you can get quotes from anyone who doesn't like Elon and just mix match them together and like create any narrative that's negative you want about Elon and taking over. It's crazy. It's like the art of persuading people by some of these journalists. They're pretty good at it. They've been doing it for a long time, and unfortunately a lot of mom and pop people at home that just read newspapers for informing their opinions and views of the world are reading this stuff, and they don't really get to look closer in at what's actually happening at the sources. So it's like there's a lot of narratives that are trying to spin this in a very negative way, unfortunately. And so I don't know how far that can go. Do you think that can really ruin some of this, or what do you think, Matt? I mean, he's always been subjected to that, right? But now it seems like
Yeah.
another level.
I mean, it's kind of like that one tweet he said where he's seen so many of these like hero villain cycles that it's like hard to keep track anymore. And
Yeah.
it does seem like this is certainly going to add some gas to the flames of that whole debate. My sense is it's probably going to settle down in 2 months or so. Like people are
Yeah.
gonna. I remember it being like kind of a big deal when Bezos bought the Washington Post too. It's like, oh, like now it's going to be
Yeah.
just like the puppet mouth or mouthpiece for for Amazon. And I think people don't really have that view anymore. And he still gets
Yeah.
criticized for that every once in a while.
Yeah.
And so I kind of think the same thing's going to happen here. Probably it'll be a little bit more vocal just because Elon is more polarizing than Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
So I do kind of suspect that it'll be a little bit more insidious or persistent, but I don't think there's going to be anything serious coming out of it. I think 2-3 months from now, people are just going to realize that they like tweeting, and there's like this whole thing with the hate speech that like Elon took over, and all of a sudden like use of the N word was up like 500%. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, that wasn't some new corporate policy, like it was an attack vector, like he said.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I,
Or
I
like there's like calls to investigate. I think Chris Murphy, the Democratic senator from Connecticut or something, said he's initiating a call. He's trying to get a committee together to investigate Saudi Arabia's ownership in Twitter, although they've been an owner of Twitter all along. Like, it's like
yeah.
it's just excuses for politicians in a lot of ways to virtue signal and try to generate, get their base energized before elections, which is in a few
Yeah.
days. Yeah. So,
Yeah, that timing of it is actually kind of interesting. But I think, I mean, he was really wise, I think, not to change anything or like reinstate Trump right away or anything like that.
yeah.
He's like, all right, let's take our time and figure out the right way to do this.
Yeah.
And I think if he's, going to accomplish what he set out to do, which is to create, an actual public town square where, there's something of a balance back and forth, and people can kind of choose the level of controversy they want to see in their feeds.
Yeah.
Like nobody's really going to be against that. It's going to be very hard to kind of criticize Elon for I like being a far right wing politician or something like that when
Yeah.
if he really is successful in kind of balancing both the left and the right. So
Yeah.
I think it'll all blow over because he's going to implement this successfully, but there's a bit of risk here, I think.
I
Um,
wouldn't be surprised if like there's so much controversy. He's becoming such a bigger and bigger figure in society that everything he does is going to be turned into articles and sensationalist clickbait journal. Like I saw some headline like Dogecoin rises rapidly after Elon tweets picture of his dog Shiba Inu dog or something, and like he might have just been tweeting a picture of his dog, not trying to like signify anything to Dogecoin, but now like people will call in the SEC like Elon's manipulating crypto markets by tweeting pictures of dogs or of his
yeah,
pet, and like
yeah,
everything
yeah.
he does like is going to trigger so many people. Like I don't know, Hillary Clinton posted some crazy kind of, in my mind, a crazy like a judgment political tweet about the horrible you know uh, incident assault that Nancy Pelosi's husband went through, and she's like, "Yeah, this is the Republicans caused this." It was basically like blaming Republicans for doing this, and we have to stop them or something. I don't know. And
Mhm.
Elon just tweeted back like in response, like, "Hey, it's a tiny chance." He's saying tiny chance. He's not saying there is. He's just saying, "Hey, you never know. Like, we have to investigate things more. There's a tiny chance there's more to this story, and." It doesn't mean he's saying there is, but so it triggered so many people. I actually started looking into it because of that, and I was like, "Wow, this guy Paul Pelosi is not an innocent angel. He had like a crazy DUI. He's 82 years old, and he like could have killed people just like a few months ago, driving like heavily intoxicated." And I looked at the video of it, and like and there's just lots of red flags with the guy. It doesn't mean he didn't get assaulted, right? But it means like, maybe things should be investigated a little more before we have judgment on things, and it just triggered so many people that I even like said like, "Hey, what's going on? Like, does anyone know?" I'm just trying to investigate with the Twitterverse. Like, does anyone know the background of this guy more? Like, and people just get so upset. Anything political and everything he does that can be perceived as political is going to trigger so many one half of the population one way or the other, and it's going to be there's going to be like I don't know. He's going to need a heavier security team than he has now, I think.
Yeah, so the Paul Pelosi tweet was kind of interesting in my mind because it wasn't just like all the people on the left got upset with him. I think there were a lot of people on both sides of the aisle that were, essentially thinking, "Oh, you're getting like that down into the muck where you shouldn't be." Um,
Mhm.
and there were a lot of people that are kind of like full on Tesla bulls that were really upset with the way that he handled that. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I kind of took it. So you and I haven't talked about this yet, but I kind of took it the same way that you did, Emmett, where he was just being very literal. Like there's a chance that there's more to the story here.
Yeah.
And my
Yeah.
thinking is it's kind of like his Asperger's is like he's just like stating a fact. He's not trying to be
Yeah.
controversial. He's just thinking like
Yeah.
it could be that there's this surface level story doesn't pan out. Then he did a
Yeah.
little bit more digging. Turns out that's probably highly unlikely. So he deleted the tweet. But still, all these
Yeah.
people were incredibly upset. So,
Yeah.
um,
Lots of articles. I mean, we were all fooled by Juicy Smollett, right? Within that, remember that case? Like, if the next day anyone tweeted like, "There's a chance this is false," you'd be vilified. Like, you'd be taken to the
oh
town
yeah,
square
you
and
would have
whipped.
been
You know?
for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's lots of cases of this where so he's just learning from the past and saying, "Hey, there's a tiny chance something else happened here." Given the past to the guy and this. So people got so upset. It's just I don't know. It triggers so many people. And that's why I put out a tweet that says like suspending judgment is like one of the hardest things to do. And like sometimes you have to suspend judgment on something that seems so emotionally triggering until like all the information, like we weren't physically there to witness it. There's no like security camera footage shown of the incident yet. There's like I would think they have security camera footage, by the way. I mean, this house is like it's like one of the most powerful political people in the country. You'd think they have security camera footage everywhere. So I don't, I'm sure he was assaulted. And it was a terrible thing, but Elon, he's just like you said, stating a fact, a tiny chance. We don't have, there's could be something else here, but people went crazy with it, and like it was like all over the weekend. Everyone, even like I talked to my dad, and he's like triggered about it a little bit. You could tell, but he's just most people don't understand the context. He's just responding to Hillary Clinton. He's not outwardly just like putting it out there. He was responding to someone who's kind of using it to their political advantage in a wrong way, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. So Martin Muldoon in the comments here says, with all that's going on, Elon should refrain from getting involved in guessing games. I think that was one of the more common criticisms that I've seen. Just like, just put your head down, do your work, Elon, and stop trying to like get involved in every single controversy, because it brings you down, it brings Twitter down, it brings Tesla down. And I think there's a decent point there. But I think Elon, he really is so committed to actually promoting free speech that I think he
Yeah.
wants to be kind of a signal of that, like, I'm gonna get things wrong from time to time, but I think people who look closely will understand that he actually has good intentions.
Yeah.
But a lot of others will just use every single incident like this as a chance to kind of sling mud and
Yeah.
just try to bring him down. So I don't think the
Yeah.
controversy is going to end, but it'll
No, it's
morph. Our
there
our,
could
our
be like a
national attention
Nash.
span's too short.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I could see there being like National Enquirer type outlets just hanging on everything Elon's doing. Like, they have stuff like that for the royal family in the UK or whatever.
Yeah,
Well, there's probably going to be like businesses made of just hanging on every single word or emoticon or whatever, emoji that Elon tweets, and like creating, articles. And I might even look at some of that stuff. I don't know. I mean, there's so many people fascinated, obsessed with Elon. I mean, people that hate him that'll buy it. It's going to
yeah.
be, he's going to, he's already becoming in front of us like the biggest figure in our living history that we've lived in. It's really crazy. So we'll see how it evolves. But yeah, I mean, what does it mean for Tesla stock? I mean, what do you think? The Twitter, him becoming the biggest person in living history. What does this mean for Tesla stock? Do you think it's good or bad overall, or do you think it's neutral? What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, so I think it's mostly neutral, but there's all sorts of stuff going on. I mean, first off, I was a little bit surprised that he didn't have to sell more Tesla shares to close the deal. I don't know if
Hmm.
you've seen this, but I haven't really seen any details of how the financing was secured, and like who the third party equity was, and so I'd be
Yeah.
very curious if more of those details get public, because apparently he didn't need to sell any more Tesla shares, so that's certainly good news. So that was the most immediate benefit to Tesla, in my opinion. Then like you've got this thing of like advertisers leaving, and so like GM left right away. So
Yeah.
Mary's leading once more. So there's going to be a little bit of that, I think, but I think mostly that's going to hurt kind of Twitter's business model. So they're going to really have to figure out how to stop bleeding cash there, because they've got a lot of interest they need to pay with this new debt financing that went in there. So there's a lot of heavy lifting, I think, that needs to be done on the Twitter side. But as for Tesla, I don't really think it is going to be much of an impact. I've seen some people kind of commenting that it could, like, there's this controversy. I think Laura Kolodny, I don't know if that's how you
Mm,
pronounce her name, but
yeah.
she had this whole like article about how like they were using Tesla's resources, and so that was going to like slow down FSD and like all this stuff. And it's so funny because it's like these are the same people who always say that FSD is a sham and it's never going to go anywhere, but then all of a sudden it's a controversy if you're like using those resources for something else. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of think it's going to be a nothing burger. But do you have thoughts? Like, is there going to be one of the interesting angles I haven't really thought too much about is like, is there going to be some marketing benefit to Tesla of using
In the
Twitter
future.
somehow? Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah. I think there's going to be synergies. Like, speaking of that, Laura Kolodny, she's in the business. She, ever since I can remember, she's always been looking for ways to smear Elon. And I've heard people met her in person and said that she's very nice and like a normal like lady or a nice person. But I don't understand how someone like that is just like they're on like a mission to smear him. They must think he's like an evil person and just trying to do present maybe that's how they get more clicks. I don't know, but it's
Yeah,
not good.
I've spoken to
Yeah.
her, and she seems very reasonable, but like she's got a very ingrained point of view, and it's just
Yeah.
it's not altering as new facts come out. So it's a little
Yeah.
frustrating. But anyway.
I think I have this suspicion that a number of these journalists have become sort of like Jim Chanos disciples of some degree, because
Mhm.
Jim Chanos made some very wealthy journalists, some journalists very wealthy with the Enron thing when he discovered or kind of put a big deal about Enron. I think some journalists got very wealthy off of writing books about that or discovering it and became well known in their community. And so I think there's something there where he's sort of like respected among some of these journalists that want to find the next Enron, and he's somehow convinced that Tesla is the next Enron, and so they've sort of thought that for a while now. But that's not the case, we know. But they live in a different reality. They're trying to prove, but it's never going to come that. Speaking of which, I was at a Halloween party this weekend, and one guy I was introduced to, I guess he works at a big trucking company in like their new energy division. He does like solar farms. Like, oh yeah, my partner did wind farms. So he's like, yeah, I'm all about that. And he's like, and hydrogen fuel cells. That's the future. And I was like, what do you mean? Like just for energy storage? Or he's like, everything. I'm like, transportation too. He's like, yeah. He's like trucks. Like he's like, we're converting all the trucks to hydrogen fuel cell. You'll see. He's like, well, what about the electric? He's like, no, Tesla, the electric vehicle. Like his big thing was like lithium ion is too heavy, and it's like he had some term for it, like on the roads, it destroys the roads because they're too heavy, the trucks, and they crush the road. I don't know, it's kind of crazy. And
It was like the Bill Gates thing from 3 years ago,
yeah,
and Elon's like,
yeah,
"No, we have these trucks. They're actually working, so you don't know what
yeah.
you're talking about." It's
Yeah. And then I threw in there at some point in our conversation, I was like, well, Elon Musk calls them hydrogen fuel cells, right? And then he was like, I feel like it upset him because I think that's his livelihood, is trying to work on this. And then, like, as I was trying to walk away, he kept saying, Tesla is a ticking time bomb. And he said it to me like 3 times in a row as I was walking away. I was trying to like plan how I exit this conversation. And he was just like really anti Tesla. It
Yeah,
was really
people get so
crazy.
triggered. It's so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It
what
was,
were
I
you
don't
were you
know.
dressed up as something for this Halloween party?
Yeah, Peter Pan
Okay.
and yeah, so my wife was Tinkerbell. First time I've dressed up in like 5+ years. But back to, Elon and Tesla, not to get too sidetracked there. I mean, they've been sharing SpaceX and Tesla have been sharing resources for over a decade, and both companies are better for it. I don't see why that's not going to be the case for Twitter and SpaceX and Tesla. The top engineers, you can share
Mhm.
information. The top Twitter engineers might do something helpful for Tesla safety, of
Yeah.
logging verifications. There's lots of synergies there. The app of Twitter does some special things that maybe can be borrowed into the app of the Tesla app.
Yeah.
Eventually they will be combined. Eventually
Yeah.
it's going to be one big X.com app or something where you'll have all these synergies between Tesla and SpaceX and Starlink. Maybe, your phone will be connected to Starlink with T-Mobile, and maybe, it's going to be really incredible, the future that gets drummed up here with the Twitter, takeover. I'm excited. I think it's only good from here. There'll be lots of smearing articles saying all this negative stuff, but yeah. And I'm also surprised that there's no reported new stock sales. Some people speculated that his foundation they donated a bunch of shares to, perhaps somehow that took a position. I'm not sure about the rules of that, how that works, but um, yeah, I will find out more in the next few weeks. I would think about the actual financing details of it.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how that information comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but on like the shared resources, I mean, one of the criticisms of that though has just been that it's like you're stealing resources from Tesla. But I'm almost certain that these people would or the that Twitter would be paying Tesla for use of those individuals. I mean, that's the way that it's done. I mean, in a lot of companies, there are different divisions or different legal entities where you actually can't use the same resources. So there's this idea called transfer pricing, where you just like you pay an arm's length transaction to different divisions within a company, and I think you would
Mhm.
certainly do the same thing, with Twitter and Tesla. So I really think that there's going to be or that was really not an issue. But I'm very curious to see the financing arrangements, though. I think there was
Yeah,
a lot of interest.
Larry and Goldberg in the comments says there's a significant increase in private financing of the Twitter deal. Yeah, I heard that too. And I heard the 13 billion debt being serviced at these interest rates is like a billion a year or something. That's pretty high
Mhm.
compared to when interest rates were, much lower. So yeah, the debt financing, the debt servicing is going to be expensive. They'll have to do, figure out how to make money quick in Twitter to make it worth it. Seems like. Um, So yeah, so let's move on to the next thing. You had a big guest over the weekend, right? Tell us about that. You had someone visiting you.
Yeah, two guests actually. So we've spoken a couple times on this channel, and actually had Florian Minderop, who is the founder of Mr. Green. He was a guest host on the channel at one point. But for those who are not familiar, Mr. Green is a European leasing company. They basically lease Teslas. They combine like the vehicle lease with insurance and maintenance, and it's like a whole thing. So you just pay one subscription price. But anyway, they own 5,000 Teslas. They are really trying to increase their sales internally or to their customers of full self driving, because they want to lock in today's prices. But
Mhm.
being in Europe, they've never been able to actually experience the beta. So I've been talking with them for a while, and they ended up flying out on Saturday to test out the beta. So they've been driving my car around for a couple days now, just experiencing the beta for the very first time. So it was very interesting, kind of seeing them experience it because they're huge. I mean, they're kind of I don't want to say betting their company, but they're investing heavily with upside optionality. That's kind of um, contingent on FSD beta really improving drastically and certainly rolling out to Europe. And so it was very interesting seeing these two guys, their experience driving it. And they had different personalities too, which was really interesting. So Keys, this the first guy who drove it, he's kind of like me. He's like a little bit more, I don't say timid, but like you don't want to upset the other drivers on the road. So when it starts doing something silly, you just take over just to be polite to the other drivers on the road. But Mark is very much of like the James Dowma mindset, where he's like, it hasn't done anything wrong. I don't mind being honked at, so he just kind of lets it go.
Yeah.
So it was funny because they had like slightly different experiences, but Mark, who's one of the co-founders, so he and Florian were the co-founders of this company. He was just completely blown away by it. He's just like, because he let it kind of do its thing and like get through the mistakes, and he could see that it would eventually do the right thing safely. He was just incredibly impressed. So
Mm.
yeah, they had a really great time. They've been driving around all over town for the last couple of days, and I think one of them's driving to Chicago today, do a little road trip, try it in that downtown traffic. So yeah, it'll be. I'm kind of curious once they've had a little bit more time to digest, what their thinking is, and if they're going to try to accelerate their rollout or what. But it was very interesting talking to them, and just a couple cool guys too. We went to the U of M Michigan State game too, which was a lot of fun. Got to experience
Yeah.
some real American culture. So
Great.
yeah, it was a really good time.
Yeah, I can't imagine a couple people more anticipating the experience of FSD beta more than they were, right? Because they're in this
Yeah.
business in Europe that's been waiting for FSD beta, and they're like 5 to 10,000 Teslas they pretty much own and lease out, and they're planning out how to do the FSD beta implications of their business for years now.
Hmm.
Watching videos of the U.S. people like you, and here they do. They come to here. They come. They travel to the U.S. specifically almost to test out FSD beta. So they were the most. They probably had the most interesting expectation, long oversought
Yeah.
expectations of anyone ever using FSD beta, and they were clearly very excited, impressed. It
Yeah.
sounds like.
And I was a little bit nervous because I was so excited to get beta when I got it for the first time. I mean,
Yeah.
I was like just spending hours driving, trying to like game my safety score to be just right.
Yeah.
And when I finally got it, I was actually really disappointed. It was much worse back then. This was a year ago.
Yeah.
I was kind of like, oh, this is actually making mistakes all the time, and I've got to take over, and it's uncomfortable. And um, but it's improved so much in the last year. But I still had a little concern that they might, have the same sort of thing and think, oh, maybe we need to, slow down a little bit our, deployment of FSD. But seems like they had the opposite reaction, at least from what the initial take I could tell was. So
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, it's come a long way since when you first got it too, so it's like, and I saw an electric report that the newest version is being pushed out right now or today or something.
yeah, I saw
Um,
the Dirty Tesla, a couple others were downloading it. So yeah,
yeah.
it'd
So
be really cool if I got that too, and they could see one of the updates and see
yeah,
see what happens.
this is the most anticipated. I would say this is the most anticipated release of FSD beta in many months, right? And it's been talked about for a while. It was supposed to be like a new number,
Probably,
but
yeah.
it
I mean,
just
like
wants.
probably the first .69 was a bigger deal, but aside from that, I think this is gonna be a really big one.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, exciting. A couple friends of mine have Teslas, or one in particular I was talking to. He bought the FSD beta, hasn't got it yet, and another one I met at the same Halloween party said the same thing. So I know there's a lot of people that bought the FSD beta, at least here in the Bay Area, that haven't got it yet. So when wide release comes out, they'll get it, and it'll be curious to see all these people that don't follow Tesla as closely as we do, but somehow they paid for the FSD beta when they start using it, or if they start using it actively, what their thoughts are about it, versus people like
Yeah,
us who are watching other people's videos about it before we even try it.
right. Yeah, well,
Mm.
one of the things I think Farzad might be the one who coined this, but he calls it the wife test. So like he can
Yeah,
handle it all the time, but like when he turns it on with his wife in the car, she gets so annoyed, and it's the same thing for me because it's just
me too.
uncomfortable. It's like
Mhm.
it. when you can get to the point where your wife or some uninterested passenger who does not care about full self-driving at all,
Or prefers it.
um, you know, yeah,
Maybe they at
yeah,
some point
or
they prefer it. Yeah.
at some point they
Like an
prefer it. Like
autopilot
that to me
now.
is going to be a big milestone. And
Yeah.
then you and I were talking for a while. When would you actually feel comfortable going in the back seat? I still feel like we're a long ways off from that. So that's kind of like my gauge of robo taxis.
Yeah. Mhm.
But FSD is I think it's getting close. Like the rate of improvement lately has been very, very strong. So
Yeah.
makes me
And
optimistic.
it's very good with surprisingly so good with pedestrians and bikes that I've noticed, so, you don't want it to make any mistake whatsoever on that stuff, obviously. But so far it's been very impressive to me on pedestrians and bikers.